Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Linda Campbell Pevac. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Linda's been on twice before, but you weren't Linda then, were you?
I was not.
No.
I was incognito.
You're incognito. She was under the radar as Emma Stevens. So if you know Emma Stevens and you know Linda Campbell Pevac, because they're the same people, listeners. They're the same people.
Yeah. I'm happy to say.
Yeah. So she's been on twice before, and the first book was just awesome. And as I was saying, the genius in this in your story of you mentioned this idea of being addicted to thoughts, and you talk in the book a lot about addiction as well, right? Addiction to alcohol and an addiction to thought, and that addiction to thought seems to be what stops us changing. Yeah,
it definitely can. Yes.
Yeah, it can.
You're kind of stuck in that hole.
You're stuck in that hole. Yeah. I like your words there, because I say it does and you said it can, which is a little bit more of a positive vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because we have choices.
We have choices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have choices. We're not always choosing.
I don't believe we are. If we try to listen to our critical thinking, and if we practice that muscle and be reflective, then you can decide, do I want to stay in that hole? Or what is my plan to get out of that hole and go somewhere else?
Yeah.
But if I'm addicted to my way of thinking of, I belong in this hole, I was put in this hole for some reason, so I guess I have to stay here.
Yeah.
And I just don't think like that. Thankfully, I think about, what's my plan to get out of this hole and do something different?
Yeah. So before we started recording, we came to this to this point that we agree on in terms of, as adoptees, we are great, and the general public, it's not just adoptees, right? We're great at describing trauma. We are less great, by quite a long way, at describing healing. So why do you think that might be?
Well, I can only answer for myself.
Sure.
And what I would say is, when I was a physical trainer, personal trainer, I would always tell my clients that your desire to change has to outweigh your desire to stay the same. And while we may say, I want to lose 20 pounds, I want to gain muscle, but then the question is, are you prepared to do what it takes to get that done? Or are you prepared? A lot of people say they want to write their own book. Well, what's your plan to do that? And it has to outweigh your desire to, I don't know, go shopping instead, or for working out, I want to watch TV instead. So you've made your choice, but you're so far away from what you said you wanted to do. And until you realize what you're doing, you're in your own way. So for me, I've had to decide, as a person, I've declared that this is the way I want to be. This is my new story. That was the last line in The Gathering Place. I'm going to write a new story, because I wanted to leave my broken story behind. And it's not that I'm changing things or making things that happened to me not happen. It was just, now as a person, I have a choice. Which way do I want to go?
Yeah.
I believe a lot of other people have that same ability.
Yeah. So this idea that we're getting in our own way is talked about quite a lot. And I take quite a logical view of that. Right. So if we're getting in our own ways is a metaphor for something that's going on within us. Right. in the real world, we can't actually get in our own way. So if we're walking down what we would call a pavement, or what you would call a sidewalk, right? There aren't two of us.
Right.
There aren't two of us. We can't actually get in our own way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not us that's getting in our own way. It's something else that's getting in our way. Because if we're getting in our own way, we're going to start beating ourselves up. Yeah, why am I not doing this? I'm getting in my own way. I want to lose 20 pounds, but I'm getting in my own way. I don't go to the gym enough. I'm too easily I'm too easily going at the what we would call sweets or chocolate. You could call candy, right? It's us that's getting in our. It's us that I'm getting in my own way. There's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me? Why can't I change? Why can't I stick at any diet? Why can't I stick at any regime? And it becomes a bit of like self criticism stuff with that word.
Self-fulfilled prophecy.
Sorry, yeah,
a self-fulfilled prophecy.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, you have two schools of thinking going on in your head of, I say I want this, but this is my action of what I'm actually doing. And so they're in that internal conflict of really kind of cognitive dissonance.
Right. So it's a thought then that's getting in our way rather than us getting in our way.
Right. We're talking symbolically.
We're talking symbolically, yeah. Yeah. So whenever we go anywhere symbolically, I'm going to get drawn into the primal wound thing as the primal wound thing as a symbol, as a metaphor, as a diagnosis. So for me, it was like a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
It was a relief. There was a relief, and that relief then shifted into a belief. Right? I thought, I am stuck with this. I'm stuck with this wound. So the relief at a diagnosis turned into a belief. So a belief, and then and therefore like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Mm-hmm. Just that the more I believed it, the more I felt I was stuck in that place. And so if trauma's, like, again, using symbology, if trauma's a tunnel, I went further and further down the tunnel. And the further I went, the darker it got. Mm-hmm. But luckily, at some point, something happened that made me turn around 180 degrees, whilst mm-hmm. there was still light at the other end of the tunnel, right? And then I started inching back into the light stuff. So what stops us change? You mentioned that you're working on a third book at the moment, which is about your healing journey. What's coming to your mind from that healing journey that might be useful for the listeners?
I'm thinking about the primal wound right now. That what helped me is, yes, there's a label for what a child goes through when it's severed from its biology. That is a fact. But I'm also a non-dualistic thinker. So to me, that doesn't equate to I'm doomed. To me, it's like, okay, now I know the why, but now it's up to me to figure out. And if I have a why, I can always figure out a how. So to me, it wasn't like a diagnosis or I had a terminal disease. It was, where can we go from this, and how can I change it into what I want it to be, instead of a label of, well, I'm this, so don't expect me to do anything more because I'm damaged, no good, and this is where I'm just going to remain.
So,
and that's just goes against everything I am as a person.
Yeah. So you didn't go through the darkness that I went through before I turned around. When you read it, you were straight. Okay, I've got a why now. I'm moving on.
I think that going through the 12 steps with Alcoholics Anonymous helped me tremendously to be able to not get stuck in, there's a step 4 and 5, where it's to take inventory of what you feel like your defective nature is, and to make amends to everyone you feel like you've wronged. And I saw so many people in the program get stuck, and that is not the purpose of step 4 and 5. It's to clean out your closet, take a shower and get all that stuff, let it go. And then you can move on to step 6, 7, 8, 9, and on and on. But it was never designed to have you just stay stuck there and lay down and die. So because I went through those steps, I've put everything else in my life through a 12-step procedure. And it's really where I think I'm able to maybe bridge that gap from here I am at the primal wound, and I built a bridge to get over to now where am I going? What's next?
Yeah.
And I can let other stuff go.
Yeah. So I'm wondering where to go from there. Well, let's stick with the 12-step stuff, because one of the feelings that I've got, or one of the beliefs that I've got, is that healing is more spiritual for me. In my my experience, it's more spiritual than it is psychological. How would you see that, the mix, the ratio, the relative importance of as what you called the holy mystery in the episode, the first interview that we did with you on the gathering place, and the psychology, the thoughts and the feelings? How would you see that mix for you in terms of what healing is?
It makes me think of the whole debate of nature versus nurture. The endless debate of which one is it, which one? But that's black and white thinking. So few things are actually all right or all wrong. So when you bring up that question of which one, or what's the mix, I just don't think you can separate them.
Okay. Well, for me, being able to separate who I am from how I feel, right? So who I am, spirit, how I feel, psychology, and my psychology, my emotional, whatever, my emotional intelligence stuff. That's been really big somehow. Whereas for you, you're happy. You see it. Your healing doesn't look the same as that. It hasn't had that distinction. Is that making sense? No, Linda's frozen. We just lost Linda for a minute there. Did you hear the question, Linda? You did not. Okay. So, well, I wonder what it was. I wonder if I can remember it.
Psychology versus spirituality.
Yeah. So that separating, for me, separating who I am, which I would call the spiritual side, from how I feel and what I think, which I would call the psychological side. That's been a big part of my healing. That separation. But for you, that hasn't been a thing. Dividing them in this kind of left brain kind of Simon Ben rational blokey way hasn't been a thing for you, right?
I think I've gotten in plenty of potholes of where I've had to recognize my thinking has gotten distorted. And that's where nowadays I like to talk to myself and see what's going on. And I get myself out of those potholes a lot quicker these days than I ever have in the past. In the past, my conditioning was so heavy and I hadn't gained enough wisdom to be able to get my own self out of that pothole, or to have connections with my spirituality that showed me I don't have to stay in this pothole. So yeah, I've been there plenty of times.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you mean by conditioning?
The conditioning from our childhood home, the conditioning that we get from society, it is just all those many layers of messages that we receive all our life, and we take it as truth. And for me as a person, I usually internalize these things. And so my conditioning got so thick and fibrous that it's been pretty difficult to just try to keep shedding those layers. And I'm going to continue that path. And as long as I walk this earth, that's my work to get done. And I accept that.
Yeah.
But conditioning can really do a number on us if we allow it to. And if our conviction to change is not greater than our desire to stay the same, then we will stay the same.
Yeah. What's coming to mind? So conditioning is kind of like a summary of our thoughts, beliefs, feelings, all wrapped up and called one thing. Is that what?
I think our internal messages that we give ourselves, and also the external world that we get all this input, and we try to make sense of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, the one that's the story that's coming to mind is for me is about getting bullied on scout camp. And so I'm the young kid. I don't know what I'm doing. The old kid tells me, who's in charge of the tent, tells me to do stuff. And then he and I do it, and I don't do it right. And he makes me kneel on the grass and say I'm a stupid, worthless piece of stuff, and with lots of swear words, which we won't mention on a family show. And I took that in. So the external bully becomes the internal bully, the bully in our head, our what other people call it, our inner critic, the unrelatable, sorry, what do they call it? The unreliable narrator. Have you heard?
I haven't heard that term.
Unreliable narrator, yeah. So the narrator is like a commentator on that's giving an opinion,
yeah,
on what's happening on a football field or football pitch. That so it's the one that's judging. It's the one that's judging what we do. What judging our persona. What do you think what do you think our conditioning is within the adoptee community?
With the onset of the internet, I feel like we're, to a certain extent, at the infancy of figuring out as an adoptee what our trauma is, how we feel about it, where we want to go from here. And because of the internet, we've never had that opportunity before to bond together, and for me to hear your story and you to hear my story and all of that, networking that's going on. This is kind of, and I think right now we are still going, yes, I'm traumatized. And we're hanging on to that so tight that I believe it kind of blocks our view of moving on, of, okay, here it is. We've defined it. Now, where do we want to go forward?
Yeah. Well, it's back to that point of us being great at describing trauma, but not so great at describing healing.
Yeah.
For me, one of the things that came up in your first book kind of points out why we may not, why we aren't so great at healing, and that's what you call the holy mystery. I couldn't remember the exact word, but
that was it.
So what do you mean by the holy mystery?
Well, in my opinion, the word God has gotten so overused that I really seldom ever say that name at all. And I think of the holy mystery as being our web of our existence, of our universe, of everything that's connected to the next thing and the next thing. So I see God as more of a web, and that it's within all of us. And I can draw from that higher power for strength and guidance, and gives me that personal strength that I need to maybe make that huge change that I say I want to make. And so I hold myself accountable. And I feel like I am given that strength to do so through the holy mystery.
Right. So, I mean, you mentioned that earlier on that you're a non-dual thinker. So what in non-duality terms might be called the infinite intelligence? Is that if I'm drawing on those right? So you're talking about a web of wisdom, I think is the word that you use, which is, I think, is lovely.
Yeah.
Great metaphor. Yeah. It's a great metaphor.
Yeah. Web of mystery.
The web of wisdom. Web of wisdom. Web of wisdom. Yeah. Like, see, this is why I think it's hard to kind of point out what healing is, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's driven by things like the holy mystery. It's driven by things like the web of wisdom. It's driven mm-hmm. by things like infinite intelligence, and they're all really tricky things for us to get our heads around. Our brains are designed for concrete things like well, when I think of concrete, something I came up with recently when I was this idea of our beliefs, they get reinforced. So you've got concrete, and then you've got concrete that's got steel through it, right? Reinforced concrete, and that's how our beliefs, that's how rock solid our beliefs get, right? So I've taken something here that's quite abstract, and I've given a metaphor to it. And now, mm-hmm. once I've given a metaphor for it, then it gives it, I think it gives it more clarity. It's more shareable as a metaphor. And it becomes a thing. It becomes more serious. It's more likely to give itself it's more likely to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because we've given it credence, we've given it oxygen. It's grown. It's become
also become our familiar. It's where we
yeah. So when and that becomes like a comfort blanket that gets in the way of our change.
And that right there is, while we don't want to admit that our desire to change doesn't outweigh our desire to stay the same, is because we are getting something from hanging on to it. And I'm not suggesting that any of us wants and loves our trauma. I'm not suggesting that. But I am saying that unconsciously, we could be getting something from hanging on to the familiar, which is the same reason why we see a victim go from a victimized relationship to another, to another, to another. I call myself a cult hopper because I was so familiar with cultic abuse it was familiar to me from my family life to the person I married, and then on to what we know A Fire Is Coming is all about. It was just the familiar until I finally saw what I was doing, the pattern, the sequencing, and was able to break that concrete steel enforced conditioning.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
It's a seeing thing then.
Yeah.
It's a seeing thing. So I think healing is a seeing thing.
Yeah.
It's, and then we can look at all. So if we were going to use biblical language, we can call it epiphanies, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to use if we're going to use the language of invention, I'm thinking of the Archimedes and his eureka moment.
I was going to say eureka. You stole it.
Okay. So epiphanies, eureka moments. What other things do you? How else would you describe? What other words would you come up with for what we're talking about here? Epiphanies, eureka moments.
Like just ground shaking, that it just shakes everything you always thought was true. And you all of a sudden have that chilling moment of all the air sucked out of the room. Maybe I haven't been seeing this as clearly as what I thought I was.
Yeah. So there's a kind of tumultuous, I don't use that word very often, but tumultuous, there's a it's a visceral,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's mind, body, and spirit. You can't separate the three.
Yeah.
So visceral. Mm-hmm.
Visceral. So what happens in our bodies then when we're having what's happened in your body when you've had those moments of insight?
It just is like that pregnant pause of where, like I just described, I stop dead in my tracks and I start thinking and analyzing and researching. I'm an investigator at heart. So when I have those moments, I'm writing about it, I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to research to see what this idea is and where it's leading to. What is it? How is it important to me?
Cool. I love that. Have you ever linked that investigator talent or skill, mindset, whatever it is? Have you ever linked that to non-duality?
Yes, because I realized what a black and white thinker I'd been in my first part of life. And I hadn't gained that emotional intelligence or maturity, or in AA, we call it emotional sobriety. And you can have a relapse in your emotional sobriety of where you go back to an earlier state of mind of where, you before you changed.
Yeah.
And you reacted in a poor way. You didn't, you weren't operating in the present in that day and time. And so I can catch myself a lot sooner these days and say, I just had a relapse of emotion. And what do I want to do to regulate myself and get back into health?
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's kind of like a converter of where these things are always going to happen. I'm always going to have a reaction to being treated poorly or someone saying something about me, but it's how I react now and how I don't internalize it. I try not to. And if I do, I try to get out of it a lot faster.
Yeah. So as you were talking there, I was thinking about the first book. I was thinking about The Gathering Place and what's called parts work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're describing earlier earlier roles, earlier parts of you, earlier life stages, and the gathering place is where you bring everybody together. Yeah.
Yes.
You bring all your different parts together, and you also look at your self, big uppercase S self.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yesterday I did a podcast with that's terrible. I only did it yesterday. My head is such a sip. Kathy McKechnie, who is an adoptee and also a therapist, and she's into parts work. So for herself and for her class, and we have you ever? I came up with this metaphor for it, for parts work and the uppercase S. So, have you ever played Trivial Pursuits? Remember that game?
A few times. Yeah, I remember.
So it's like a round disc of plastic with slots in it for 6 pieces of cheese, 6 triangles. Do you remember? Yeah. So you've got, so that it's a container. It's a plastic container with 6 triangular compartments, and each time you get a question, if you get the question right, so it's pink for sports, brown for literature, and so
right.
you win, you get the cheese, and then the name of the game is to get all your cheeses in your in your circle, right? So this was my metaphor for the big self. Is the receptacle for all the cheeses, and the parts, the individual parts. So the abandoned child, or the misunderstood, misunderstood worker who's trying to do the best job, but the boss won't listen to them. Like we've all got these different parts, and those parts are the different triangles, and that's kind of how they stick together. So it's about integrated family system. So if you're interested in, listeners, if you're interested in like this parts work stuff, then listen to first off, get Linda's book under the pseudonym, the pen name Emma Stevens. Have a look at that, because that gives it from a adoptee perspective. And also listen to yesterday's podcast with the adoptee and therapist Kathy McKenna. So right, but that's kind of, I've listened to, or I'm in the program, and I'm in the process of listening to No Bad Parts, which is about parts work, written by the guy called Richard, also known as Dick Schwartz, who is the founder of it. What comes to your mind when you think of this parts work, or this uppercase S self?
When I first started the idea of doing IFS with my therapist, and I realized I had resistance to the whole idea, and because I was misinformed, or I misunderstood what the purpose was. It's not to go back and actually change my 5-year-old. It's that my 5-year-old still comes out in me in certain situations. And so that's where my big self talks to that person that comes to me in 2023 and beyond. And so then it started making a lot of sense to me of how to maintain my emotional sobriety, of how to have that emotional intelligence and recognize who's showing up right now. It feels like a much younger part because I had this reaction, or I had this thought about something. And it's just a better way for you to have clarity if you are wanting to do that, to say, I see what's happening.
Yeah.
Which is a tool to get yourself back into health and back into 2023.
Yeah, I see that. The uppercase S self, do you feel that is impacted by trauma?
That's a big question, Simon. I'd say yes and no.
How would you say? Well, go with yes first, and then go on to the no bit.
Well, because I feel like if we're talking about self as being the essence of who I am, being spirit, I think I've always been whole. I think I came into this world and then trauma happened to me. And then it's been all along the way of how do I not let that rule my life? And so, yes, trauma has tripped me up because I'm not perfect, and none of us are. But yet at the same time, I feel like self and my connection to the Holy Mystery has help me maintain my core and to proceed.
Okay. So my take on it is that it's the reason for the diamond.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reason for the diamond on the Thriving Adoptees logo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Thriving Adoptees logo used to be an arrow going up, and it looked hopeful. It looked like a plane setting off, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was about as far as I got with it. Yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. But then about a year later or something, because I was doing the diamond. I was doing the diamond shtick with the fist all the time. You know, like, you seen me do that, yeah. So the diamond is my metaphor for the uppercase S,
Mm-hmm.
or spirit, or consciousness, or awareness, or God, all of those
Mm-hmm.
things.
All of those things.
And the fist. So I believe that who we are is veiled by the trauma. It's
Mm-hmm.
hidden by the trauma. In the same way as if I hold my clenched fist, this doesn't work on a podcast. If I hold my clenched fist up to the to the camera, which Linda can see, then and so the fist is the metaphor for trauma, because when I came out of the fog, it showed as anger.
Mm-hmm.
So the fist is a metaphor for the trauma. Fist is a metaphor for anger, and the clenched fist is white knuckling it, and it's going to do damage. Yeah, hurt people.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. No, it hurt people, and it isn't sustainable. That anger, because it's not the natural position of my hand is open. So as I unfurl my fingers, and return to the kind of like the usual state that my hand is in, then it reveals the diamond that was hidden by the trauma. So what I'm doing here is separating who I am, the diamond, who we all are, one universal diamond, from the fist of our trauma. And that separation is the bit that has been the most helpful to me on my healing journey. And as we kind of explored a while ago, that simple Simon stuff, right? It wasn't part of your healing journey. So every healing journey has got to be different, right?
Sure. Yeah. And we're going to handle it. Each of us will handle it differently.
Yeah. And yet they're all different, but they're all about those groundbreaking shifts, the eureka moments.
That's our work.
Sorry?
That's our work to do.
That's our work to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't...
If we choose to.
If we choose to. Yeah, if we choose to. Well, if anybody's listening to this podcast, whatever it is, 50 minutes in, then they're choosing to, right? I think, you know, they are, as we say, hanging out at the bus stop for insights.
Yeah.
And as I also say, there's no timetable at this bus stop. Yeah, I can't predict when the insight's going to happen. So the reason that we find it hard to describe healing, then, if I was going to answer my own question, is because it depends on the insights that we have. We all have different insights at different times of different natures. So to say, like, big thing I've learned from today is this: separation thing that I bang on about all the time doesn't, that insight isn't hundreds. It's not present. It's not seen by every single adoptee that there is, right? Because you didn't need to see that difference, and yet you've progressed along your healing journey. So maybe I should be a little bit more flexible about the messaging. We're all looking for that clarity, right? Yeah. How do we have more insights?
I think curiosity plays a huge part in it. And just having that motivation to find out more or be curious of why did this happen and when did it happen? You know, being the investigator.
Yeah. You mentioned the investigator word again then, and I asked you the question about non-duality. Sorry, listeners, coughing attack. One part of non-duality is called, I think it's not self-awareness, self-discovery. Yeah, self-awareness, self-abidance, self-discovery is one part of non-duality, which is going to the heart of who we are. The uppercase S, self, in spirit, in parts work. Seeing that changes everything, does it? See that?
How so?
Yeah. It's that. How do you talk? Do you see that uppercase S self, that true self, that, what do we call it? Web of wisdom, infinite intelligence, God, awareness, consciousness, all those things. Do you see that something as something that we feel, something that we see, something that we relate to, something we have a relationship with? How is that something that you've seen? Did you see that through parts work? Do you remember?
Yeah, I saw it through parts work, definitely. But then I'd see it in different areas of my life also. There's a word called proprioception, and it is from my physical fitness language, but it's really, you can take it psychologically too, of where you know at any time in space and time where you are and what a surface is, a hard surface stepping off into a soft surface, and it's your body's ability to maintain balance.
Yeah. So whenever I hear that word balance, I think of the high wire trapeze.
Yeah.
Is it a trapeze? No, it's not a trapeze. The walkers, the people with the big sticks that walk the wire, the high wire. That's what it called. Yeah. And those people, the people that do that, it's very rare that they are actually completely balanced. They're tweaking and adjusting, like micro adjustments all the time, a little bit left, a little bit right, a little bit left, a little bit. Does that mean anything to you, given what you said with what was the word you said?
Proprioception.
Proprioception.
So it's, neurological of how that high wire walker is adjusting those micro adjustments with his bar and everything to stay on that wire. And he's taking, all his senses are taking in, the feel of the air or the tension in his feet or trying to keep that balance. There's a lot going on there. And so that's sort of, in a nutshell, the meaning of proprioception. And you can take that psychologically because of all the messages we tell ourselves, the messages we're getting from society, how we balance all of that. And I think one of the important things to be able to tap into that is to, first of all, like yourself and have a desire to be your own cheerleader. Because if you don't get rid of those self-limiting beliefs about yourself, I don't think very much sustainable work can happen.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? You have to first like yourself.
Yeah.
And that means stripping away all those beliefs that you took as truth. And if you don't ask yourself, is that even true? Then
yeah,
you're staying in a broken story.
Indeed. Have you, I don't know if we've talked about this before, and I don't know whether you're a fan, but are you into Byron Katie? Because she's great on the belief stuff.
I've heard a little of her things, yes.
Yeah. So if people are interested in belief busting, then Byron Katie does a lot of great work in this area. She's got something called The Work, which is a 4-step process, and it is deceptively mind-blowing, right? It seems you can take it on one level, really shallow, or you can go way deep on it, and the deeper you go, the more you'll get. And I think it's something like thework.org, the work, like work.org, I think it is. But if you put in The Work, Byron Katie, everybody calls it Katie apparently. So that's the thing about beliefs. Now, interesting point about beliefs, because in the adoptee world, we don't talk a lot about beliefs, do we? It seems to be more about trauma that we talk about than beliefs. Do you agree, or is that just how I'm seeing it?
Well, I feel like it's intertwined.
Okay, yeah. So again, it's Simple Simon trying to oversimplify it, right? So how do you see that intertwining?
Well, that we get these messages that, let's say the primal wound, we learn about the primal wound, and we say, yes, that feels true to me. I feel like I went through that shock during relinquishment. And then if we intertwine that with, already we've got a belief that we're not good enough, that not enoughness disease that a lot of people have, then that's just like that confirmation of, you see, I'm no good.
Yeah.
And so we look for other things. Confirmation bias, I believe, is what it's called. You look for other things to support that belief you have about yourself, and then it can just get enormous.
Yeah. Confirmation bias is kind of the same thing as self-fulfilling prophecy, is it? Is that?
Mm.
Yeah.
I believe so.
What we focus on grows.
Mm-hmm.
What the thinker thinks, the prover proves. Confirmation bias is the psychological term for this, or self-fulfilling prophecy. And that, I believe, is one of the biggest dangers of what happens on social media, because there's a lot of stuck people in that. There's more messages of stuckness than there's more message of stuckness than there are messages of move onness or fluidity. I came up with this a few months ago. I was quite pleased with it, but it doesn't seem to have caught on. But you've got this word mindset, right? Well, who wants a mindset? Yeah, a mindset. When I ask you what helps us heal and stay in the game, looking for our insights, the earth shaking moments where we see stuff new, the epiphany moments, the eureka moments. A mindset is going to be, is the same as a thought getting in, a belief getting in my way. A mindset. But we use this word all the time, mindset. I think we should have mind fluid.
Yeah, I like that.
Mind
I'm
fluid.
writing that down.
Mind fluid.
Mind fluid. Because we're always changing, you know, so mind fluid really is a better descriptive.
Oh, no, we're not. Sorry, yes, that's true. That was a joke. Sorry. That's okay. Yeah, we are, yes. It is a constant state of change. And if we're seeing a lot of stuckness, then that might become a self-fulfilling prophecy for us. Whereas if we're seeing a lot of fluidity, then that becomes our reality. And you know that what was behind my questioning about the conditioning. So I've never thought about it in that way. You use the word conditioning. And I think after you said what you did, I think I summarized it as like basically all our thoughts and beliefs, everything that we've learned from the world outside us and has become our inner reality, right? Our conditioning. It started on the outside and it's in the inside. And that it's not a once and done thing. We're being conditioned. We're being conditioned all the time. We're conditioned all the time. And if we spend our time hanging around, exposing ourselves to stuck conditioning, then we're more likely to stay stuck, aren't we?
I believe so. Yes.
Because we're going to say, look, it's not just me that feels this way. I feel, and that person feels like I feel, and
I think that becomes like groupthink when that happens.
Oh,
you know, that we all confirm that this is the truth. We all buy off on it, and that's also a reason why we can just stay the same, because my whole group thinks this way.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we want fluid. We want groupthink that is mind fluid. Can we put those things together? Groupthink, fluid. I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to take the metaphor too far. So the hour we've had has just flown by, Linda. Is there anything else that you'd like to share on this? Where were we? We're talking about change and describing healing. Is there anything else that you'd like to share on?
I guess it would just be that we all have to be kind to ourselves, give ourselves grace, and ask ourselves, who do we want to be? Because it really is within us to be able to choose. And by not making a choice, you're making a choice.
Okay. So, yeah, we were talking about this sort of stuff on Facebook the other day between the two of us, weren't we? I think our conditioning chooses if we don't. The
familiar pathway is probably going to rule unless you prioritize change.
Love it. Love it. And next question is, when's your third book going to be out? Are you thinking?
I am brainstorming right now. In fact, this whole conversation we just had is going to feed right into the kind of mind fluidity that's going to happen in the third book. Okay. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And my vacation of next week's going to help a lot too.
Okay. Where are you going next week?
Going to Bora Bora.
Bora Bora.
Wow. In the French, Polynesia. Talk about fluid. I'm going to be all around water. The symbolic nature of all of it's going to be great.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, have a great holiday. And thank you, listeners. We will speak to you again very soon. I'm going to put some links to the previous episodes with Linda Emma in the show notes, so you can check those out, and links obviously to all her socials and a website. So thanks a lot, and we'll speak again soon.
Bye, Simon.